Unlisted. Save. Cool. Okay. Are we good? Are we back? Let me just bring back my chat and my control panel. Okay, are we good? I think we're good. After me messing that up. A new one. Okay. Just waiting for that to pull through. Paste done. Okay, cool. Thank you. Appreciate it, Shahir. Yeah, I've unlisted the previous stream completely just because, yeah, I don't want anyone watching that. I'm just trying to quickly share a new link on my Instagram. There we go. Cool. That should be better. Okay, cool. I think I fixed it. Okay, just needed to reshare the link on Insta, and I think we're good to go. Okay, let me actually just open up the proper interface here so that I can see what is happening. Not that one, that one. Boom. Okay, and I want that there and that there, and that all looks good. Cool. Okay, we good? Am I audible? Can I start again? After completely messing that up. Yeah, I was only half an hour into things, you know, just casually messing up my stream. Okay, let us start again. Cool, so, Shahir, you should remember low battery. Don't tell me things like this. Okay. One sec. My top-down camera is dying now. Good. There we go. Okay, and this can go over here. And I don't really know how I'm going to do this. Just checking camera frame. Okay, that's all stable. I have noticed that I do have a bit of a delay on my video again this time. I forgot to change the latency of the feed, but that is all good. Okay, cool. I think we are good to go. Blue, black, red, green. Sick. Okay, let's try and get everything a little more into frame. Move that up a little. Okay, cool. And then, yeah, just to mention, so I'm using a different device for my downward facing camera, so that's why there's this stupid watermark here. I do have a paid version for the app. I'm just using a different phone as my top down facing camera, and it doesn't have my actual Google account on it, so yeah, I'll sort that out for the next time we do one of these. So yeah, we can just hopefully ignore that. Cool. So I have been playing Magic since I think about 2011-ish. Technically, I did start in 2004, around about then, and a family friend introduced me. I played like 2, maybe 3 games, and then completely forgot that Magic the Gathering existed. And for any of you that are involved in nerd or geek subculture, you would have heard of Magic the Gathering at some point, and just kind of not really known exactly what it's about. So Magic the Gathering is a trading card game. As I mentioned, I officially started playing in 2010, 2011, and I was taught by another family friend, again, so one of my sister's close friends at the time. So we were out shopping, and I was looking at buying some trading cards. I've always been an avid collector of trading cards. I've got a lot in storage of different types. So, are we just getting the focus on the camera? All good. Just double checking that. Okay, perfect. So I've collected Yu-Gi-Oh! I've collected Duel Masters. I've collected Match Attacks, Top Trumps. I've collected most trading cards that have been out there, with the exception of Pokemon, which may be surprising to some. But yeah, when I was looking at buying some new trading cards and was considering getting some Pokemon cards, and that my sister's friend was out shopping with me, and he said, well, why are you getting Pokemon? Like, get Magic the Gathering. I was like, I don't know anyone else that plays. And he was like, well, I've been playing since I was a kid. So I was like, okay, cool, sounds good. Let's get some Magic cards. He taught me how to play, and I've been an avid collector of Magic since then. I stopped playing for about 2 or 3 years, kind of over COVID, and then I started collecting again just after COVID. And my collection, particularly in the last like 2 years, has, I'd say, quadrupled to pentupled in size. Basically, it's gotten a lot bigger. And as a result, I figured I would impart my knowledge onto the community, the geek community, people that have heard of Magic the Gathering that have never really known how to get into it. I have had some other friends recently say they know that I play, and they've got other friends that are keen to get into it, and they have no idea where to start. So I figured I would create something that is a good starting point for people to get into. Um, so, the basic concept of Magic the Gathering as a trading card game is um, essentially, my brain has gone blank, which is not ideal. um, the concept of Magic the Gathering as a trading card game is that you have a mana pool to draw from, and that allows you to cast spells. The mana pool in this comes from the land. In any fantasy game, fantasy genre, role playing genre, those of you that have been involved in any games like that will know that magic casters need some sort of energy source to feed off of, and a lot of the time it's referred to as mana to be able to cast those spells and abilities and things. So in Magic the Gathering, those are lands. Okay, these are what provide the energy required for a player to be able to play other spells and things like that. So we have 5 different colors. You do also have, and I don't know if I've got any. No, I don't have any at the moment. Another basic land type called wastes, which is basically colorless, and then any of these colors can make what is called generic, which is basically another word for kind of any color. So we have forests, which are green, plains, which are white, islands, which are blue, mountains, which are red, and swamps, which are black. And each color has kind of a sub theme that runs through it. And so as a result, certain people are drawn to playing different colors. I am aiming to build a deck of each color combination. So over here, I have a mono black deck. Over here, I also have a mono white deck already built, and I'm slowly building up a deck of each color combination. So I currently have mono black, mono white, mono blue. I'm busy building mono green and mono red and a colorless deck. And then I have a green black deck. I have a red green deck. I'm building a blue black. I have, yeah, blue black for the win, sure. So I'm busy building a new blue black. I've got actually another mono black deck. So mono just means of one color. And so, yeah, you get these different color combinations, and depending on what colors you combine, you get a different kind of theme that you can build around. So white typically is most well known for life gain. Blue, most commonly known for counter spells. So your opponent plays something, you play a counter spell, and basically that spell doesn't get to be played. Swamps deal with, or black as a color, deals a lot with bringing stuff back from the graveyard, poison, death touch, so any amount of damage is enough to kill something. And yeah, I find black is a particularly fun color to play. Red is typically your fast spells, so things that allow you to do stuff quickly. Red also deals small bits of damage, but very fast. So if you're playing one of the different what's the word I'm looking for? Formats. If you're playing a particular format that has a small deck and has you have a small amount of life as a player, red works really well at getting that damage out very quickly to be able to kill off your opponent really quickly. And then green is known as Big Stompy. It is a color that has very big creatures, very powerful creatures, but also very expensive creatures to play. So it has a lot of what's known as ramp, so bringing out extra lands to get more mana, to be able to play more stuff. Okay, so I'll get into the concept of how lands are used to play other cards in a moment. I'll do like a mock-up of how you would actually play a turn and how it's all structured. I just want to finish going through the different card types before we get to that. So I'm going to move all of this out of the way. And I have my mono black deck here just for me to go through with you guys. So we have our lands, and I've shown you guys your mono black land, which is swamp. So you can see the design of this particular swamp is very different to the other one I showed you. This is an older style one, so if I bring this up to the camera, you can see that it's from, let's get that to focus. Hopefully you can see that. Come on, focus on the card, please. There we go, 1996, okay? Whereas this one is from 2013. So you can see how the design changed, the coloration of the background. So this is kind of more of a brown, whereas they've added, this is kind of more looking like black stone around the border. Your edges on this are a lot more kind of boxy, whereas on here your edges around the nameplates and things are a lot more rounded. And so you can see how the design of the cards has actually changed over time. But this particular deck I wanted to play with the older lands just because I think they look a lot cooler, particularly in black. The black lands look a lot cooler in the older design. So we have our basic lands, okay? So that is swamp for black. And then we have lands that have a particular name, and you'll see, so this isn't a basic land, it's just a land. Welcome. No problem. Always good to have new people to the game. And that's part of kind of why I'm doing this, is to encourage new people to get into it. It's a really fun trading card game to play, but yeah, welcome. So yeah, Castle Lochthwain is a unique land. You can see it has extra abilities here. So our basic land, our swamp, you see doesn't have any abilities. It just gets used for black mana, okay? Whereas Castle Lochthwain can be used for either black mana or to use it for one of these abilities. So it enters the battlefield tapped unless you already control a swamp. Or you can tap one of any color and 2 black, as well as tap this, and you get to draw a card and you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So it's got extra abilities that you can then use. And then we have things like legendary lands. Okay, so again, you can see it's got a unique name. So this one's quite cool, nice and shiny. It's a foil card. So your legendary lands, typically any legendary card you have are only allowed a limited amount in your deck and in play at a time. The format that I play, I don't play a lot of standard or modern anymore, and I'll talk about formats in a bit. I mostly play Commander, and what that means is you can only have one copy of a unique card in your deck, and your deck is made up of 100 cards. So 100 unique cards, with the exception of your basic lands, and your basic lands you can have as many copies of a swamp as you would like in your deck. Okay, so those are lands. Now these are not referred to as spells, okay? You use them to cast spells, but they are referred to as permanents, okay? You play them and they stay in the battlefield permanently until an effect destroys them. Okay. Up next we have, I think let's look at other permanent types. So we'll look at creatures. we'll start with creatures. So I've got 3 examples here. I could probably find a couple more examples if I needed to. Let's throw in one of those, and one of those, and one of those. Okay. So up next we've got our creatures, and I'm going to start with the legendary creatures that I have here. So for example, Tergrid, God of Fright. So you can see the name bar up at the top. In the top right hand corner you have Tergrid's cost. Okay, so any spell that you can play, they have a cost up in the top right corner. It's known as your mana cost. And so you've got a little number in a circle here. So 3 in a little grey circle, and then 2 skull symbols next to it. So we already know the skulls as is represented on a swamp. Okay, so you need 2 black mana to be able to play that, and 3 of any other color. Okay, so in total you need 5 mana to be able to play Tergrid. Let's also just take a look here. So legendary creature, we have the creature type. Okay, so she is a god. And then we have the ability box below that. So we have one of these one-word abilities, and I'll expand on those one-word abilities later on. But we have a few of them. So this one's called Menace. You also have ones that are Trample, Flying, Haste, Double Strike, Vigilance, Death Touch, Reach. These are all one-word abilities that, for the most part, players that have been playing for a long time know what they do. But it becomes very confusing to new players in particular. So I'll explain what each of those one-word abilities do later on. In the past, they used to actually explain. So on this rat over here, you can see it's got one of those one-word abilities called Shadow, and it's got an explanation of what Shadow actually does in brackets below. They used to do that for all of these one-word abilities, but then as cards became more and more advanced, they needed to add more and more abilities. So those one-word abilities, they stopped explaining what they do. But fear not, I'll explain what they do a little bit later on in the stream. Okay. Then below that, we have another ability. So whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So the aim of this card is basically to steal your opponent's cards. You'll want to build a deck around forcing them to sacrifice their things from the battlefield, or cause them to discard their cards. And as a result, if it's a permanent, then you get to put it into the battlefield under your control when it would go to the graveyard, when it would go into their graveyard. So yeah, the aim of Tergrid and a deck built around Tergrid is to steal your opponent's stuff. Okay. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you have the power and toughness indicator. So for those of you that have played other trading card games, like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, you'll know it as attack and defense. In Magic, it is power and toughness. So power is how much damage a creature is able to deal, and toughness is how much damage it can receive. Okay, so that is Tergrid. You'll notice that there's a little bit of extra text down here, and there's this little symbol up here which other cards don't have. This just indicates that she is a double-sided card, so it flips over and there's other stuff on the back. But I'll get to explaining double-sided cards down the line. It's a little bit more advanced than just the basic stuff that you guys need to know right now. Okay, so that's our first creature there. Let's take a look at another creature. So this is Torak Dread Cantor. Okay, he's a much cheaper creature to cast, so he only costs 2 to be able to play. So 1 of any color and 1 black. He's another legendary creature. His creature type, he is a human cleric. Okay, so some people build their decks around a particular creature type. So someone might want to build around the demon creature type. So all of the creatures in their deck are demons. One of the guys I play with from my play group, Bob, he has a rat deck, very scary deck, very well built, and yeah, it does really well. So some people like to build what's known as, it used to be known as tribal decks, so decks built around a particular creature type. They're now known as typal, So it's basically just the connotations around the word tribal. Um, Wizards of the Coast, who are the company that create or that release Magic, they didn't feel it was politically correct enough, so they've changed the term that people use to refer to it from tribal to typal. Okay, so Torak, you can see, okay, a lot cheaper cost. He's a human cleric, and then he's got his ability box down below. So he has another one of those kind of one-word abilities called Kicker, and you can see that there's another cost next to it, and it tells you that you can pay that additional cost when you cast the spell. So it's a you may pay it, so you don't have to pay it, but it gives you that option too. And as a result, it does some extra stuff down at the bottom. We'll take a look at what it does in a moment. Below Kicker, you'll see he has protection from white, meaning white spells can't interact with him in any way. So it can't deal damage to him, can't give him any effects, anything like that. He has protection from white. Below that, we have another ability. Whenever an opponent discards a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Torak Dread Cantor. So again, like Tergrid, the focus was to get your opponent to discard cards. Torak gets extra things when your opponents do discard cards. So when an opponent discards, you get a +1/+1 counter. What that means is that +1/+1 counter is a permanent boost to the power and toughness of your creature. So +1 to power, +1 to toughness. So Torak would go from a 2/1 up to a 3/2. So it gets +1 to the 2, so power goes up to 3, and a +1 to the 1, so toughness goes up to 2. So he can deal more damage and receive more damage before he dies. And the last ability here, when he enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, okay, so if you paid this extra ability or this extra amount, okay, target opponent discards 2 cards at random. So he can then force your opponent to discard cards, which, if 2 cards were discarded, he gets 2 +1/+1 counters, he gets stronger. Okay, so you can start to see the pattern that this particular deck was built around. The aim is to either make your opponent sacrifice things or discard things from their hand. Okay. And then again, back to this demon creature that I showed earlier, the Archfiend of Depravity. So his mana cost is 5 as well. Okay, so it's what's referred to as a converted mana cost, so the total cost. So 3 of any color and 2 black. Okay, and like I said, I'll get to explaining how to pay those costs when you want to play a particular card in a moment. And then he has another one of those one-word abilities, Flying. And I'll explain those one-word abilities later on. And then in his ability box down below, at the beginning of each opponent's end step, so at the end of their turn, that player chooses up to 2 creatures he or she controls, then sacrifices the rest. So if they have a massive army out on their battlefield and you play this, at the end of their turn, they basically have to pick 2 creatures from that massive army that they've built up, and everything else dies. So very useful there. And again, that sacrifice ability comes in very useful in combination with Tergrid. Okay. And his power and toughness down below, 5 power, so he can deal 5 damage. 4 toughness, he can receive 4 damage from another creature. Okay, so that's another creature type. That is a demon. And then we have a scattering of other creatures and creature types here. So Necrogoyf. Okay, you can see that's what he's named there. He's what's known as a Lurgoyf, very weird creature type there. We have Elderfang Disciple, which is an elf cleric. Okay, so another cleric similar to Torak that we saw earlier. He's a human cleric, whereas Elderfang Disciple is an elf cleric. And then we have our Stronghold Rats, which is a rat, and it's a relatively small creature, relatively cheap, converted mana cost of 3, 2 of any color, and 1 black. Okay, so those are creatures. We've seen different creature types, and we've seen kind of what some of the creatures do. and we've seen how much certain cards cost. Okay. Next up, we have other permanents. Okay, so remember, lands are permanents. You play them, they come into the battlefield, they stay on the battlefield until an effect destroys them. Creatures, same thing. They're permanents, they come into the battlefield, they stay in the battlefield until another effect destroys them or they're killed in battle. And then we have another two permanent types: enchantments and artifacts. Okay, so artifacts are typically colorless in nature, so you can see that's why it's got this gray border. Okay, and in the mana cost, it doesn't have a particular color that you have to pay. So like the enchantment here, where you've got to pay one of any color and one black, your artifact doesn't have that. You do get some artifacts that you have to pay a color as well, so it is associated with a color. Most are colorless though. So this artifact is called Charcoal Diamond. You can see here it is an artifact. You do also get artifact creatures. I don't think I actually have an artifact creature in this deck, but you do also get other types of artifacts called equipments, like this one. So this isn't an official card, it's what's known as a proxy. I have a couple proxies printed. I own the card, it's just in another deck. I put it in as a printed card just as a placeholder. But you'll see, so this artifact in particular, again, so no color in its mana cost. It is what's known as an equipment. So this equipment, you would attach it to a creature. You see it has an equip cost down here. So this is quite a nice equipment. It costs nothing to equip it to one of your creatures. But yeah, so you get different types of artifacts. You get artifact creatures as well. And for the most part, they are typically colorless in nature. Okay, so just looking more at Charcoal Diamond, you'll see that it enters the battlefield tapped. Okay, and we'll talk about what that means, tapped. Okay, it's a term that gets used quite often in Magic. And just to kind of briefly explain it now, it means that you have used that card for its ability. So this little symbol over here, this little rotating arrow, I'm going to bring this a little closer to the camera so that you guys can see it. And then the camera decides that it wants to unfocus. Okay, so this little symbol over here is the symbol for tapping. Okay, and it's a little arrow kind of indicating to the right hand side, so that just means that you would turn the card sideways, which is known as tapping the card, to indicate that you have used it for that particular ability. Okay, so in this case, it allows you to add 1 black mana to your mana pool, so you would be able to use that to cast another spell that has black in its mana cost. Okay, so artifacts, permanents that have extra abilities. Okay, and then enchantments. So this particular enchantment is just a normal enchantment, so it would enchant you as a player. Okay, you get another enchantment type called an enchantment aura, which allows you to enchant a target player. You can either enchant yourself, or you can enchant an opponent. Let me see if I've got, I don't know if I've got one in this deck. Just try to look through this very quickly. I don't want to take up too much time just searching through cards, but I don't actually think I do have one. Just briefly looking through what I've got here. It's another creature. Enchantment. It's just a normal one. Sorceries, instants, artifacts. There's another type of enchantment, which we can talk about as well. And that's another permanent type that we might need to discuss. It doesn't look like I have a enchantment aura in this deck. If I find one in another deck that I go through just now, I'll show you guys. Okay, so enchantments, as I mentioned, are also permanents, so they enter the battlefield and they stay in the battlefield unless they're destroyed. And this one in particular says whenever an opponent discards a creature card, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So this deck, as I mentioned, it's built around causing your opponents to sacrifice and discard. And when your opponents discard, this does things to benefit you. Okay, so whenever an opponent discards a land card, you get 2 black mana, so that allows you to cast other spells. And whenever an opponent discards a non-creature, non-land card, so anything that's not a creature, okay, so this ability here affects creatures in particular. This one affects lands in particular. This affects anything else. So if it's not a creature, if it's not a land, then you get to draw a card when they discard it. Okay. And then you have this type of enchantment, which is known as a saga. Okay, sagas are like stories. Okay, and when they enter the battlefield, there you do the first effect, and then each subsequent turn of yours after that, you do the next ability. So the first turn you play this, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. I'll talk about what a planeswalker is in a moment. It's another creature type. I've got one here, or another permanent type, rather. And then your next turn, at the start of your next turn, you would do this one. So each opponent then discards a card. And then at the start of your next turn, put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So when it says a graveyard, it's not specifically your graveyard or specifically your opponent's graveyard. You get to choose a card from either to then put into the battlefield. Okay, so that's enchantments, and they stay on the battlefield. Their abilities happen. Typically, they're triggered by something else. So whenever you play a particular card, whenever an opponent does something in particular, like plays a particular spell, sacrifices a creature, then that effect happens. Okay. And then we have another permanent type. So this is a legendary planeswalker. You can't really see it too well because of the artwork is black behind the writing. But this planeswalker, think of them like another player. Okay, so they're very powerful beings in the world of Magic the Gathering, and they are beings that can basically move between different universes known as planes, hence the term planeswalkers. And they have these abilities down here that you can use one of each turn. Okay, so they have 5, well, this one in particular has 5 loyalty counters. I think I've got another one here somewhere. Where's my other Liliana? I think I know I've got another Liliana here somewhere. There, Liliana, Waker of the Dead. Okay, so this Liliana, so this Planeswalker, okay, again, you can see Legendary Planeswalker, Liliana, she is Liliana, Waker of the Dead. This one is Professor Onyx. So Waker of the Dead enters with 4 loyalty counters, so that's the starting amount of points on her, whereas Professor Onyx enters with 5. And then you either add or subtract from the amount of loyalty counters to be able to do each of these abilities, and you can only do one of these abilities each turn, each of your turns. So you can't trigger these in your opponent's turn. Okay, so her +1 allows you to you lose 1 life. Look at the top 3 cards of your library and put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Or you can -3 from her loyalty, so she would go down to 2. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. So again, that's working with that sacrifice mechanic in this deck. And then the -8, you would obviously only be able to do once the loyalty total reaches 8. So you'll have to keep using this +1 several times to get her loyalty up to either 8 or higher. And then you can use the -8 ability, which is each opponent may discard a card If they don't, they lose 3 life, and then you repeat this process 6 more times. Okay. So either they discard stuff, which benefits you from the other cards and stuff that are in play, or if they can't, then they're losing life, so you're taking off chunks of them at a time. Okay. So those are our different card types, our permanent types. Just wanted to show you this one as well. So this is an official Magic the Gathering card. It's an enchantment as well. But Magic went through a phase where instead of the black border, they decided to print cards with white borders. Okay, so you can see this one was printed in 2003 there. Whereas this one here was printed in 2014. So the first ones that they released were all black bordered, and then they went through a period in the early 2000s where they would decided, actually, you know what, we're going to spice things up. We're going to give them white borders instead. And then they were like, actually, it's a little bit clashy. Let's go back to the black borders. You do get some sets of kind of unique cards, which were printed as joke cards. They're referred to as unsets, so UN, and that's just because the name of each of those sets starts with UN. So unsanctioned, I'm trying to think of some of the others. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I haven't played with any of those sets in a while. Let me use our good friend Google quickly. Unglued, unhinged, unstable, unsanctioned. So these are all designed as joke sets. So the cards do stupid things like they deal 2.5 damage instead of like a round number. Or I know that there was a card called Turbo Slug at one point, which had super haste, which means that it comes into play and can attack the turn before you pay for it. Something stupid like that. So yeah, there's these sets that have silver borders they're designed to be joke cards. You can't play them in any official format. But some people just like to collect them for the joke kind of aspect of it. Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that white bordered card. So those are all permanents. Okay, so they're cards that come into the battlefield. They stay in the battlefield unless destroyed in one way or another, either creatures in combat or a card effect that says, you know, target opponent sacrifices a card of a particular type, or destroy target enchantment, effects like that, which would then cause you to remove that permanent, and that then goes to your graveyard. Okay, and then you have these two card types. Okay, the first is instants, and instants are spells that are once-off effects. Okay, it gets played, the effect happens, and it then goes to your graveyard. Same thing with these sorceries. Okay, so you pay the cost, it comes into play, does the effect, and then goes to your graveyard. It doesn't stay out, and you can't keep using that effect. Okay. Now, the difference between instants and sorceries is when you can play them. So we'll go through how a turn is structured. Okay, so each player has a turn. So I would have a turn, and then my opponent would have a turn, and then it would come back to my turn, and then my opponent. And depending on what time within the turn it is, determines when you can play these. So instants you can play at any time, during your turn or your opponent's turn, at any point of the game. Okay, unless they've just beaten you. Okay, in which case you've lost. I just lost the game. You're welcome, everyone. So if you have lost, then obviously you can't play anything else. You'd pack up and you'd shuffle and you'd start a new game. Sorceries, however, can only be played at a particular time. So sorceries can be played only during your turn and only during what is known as your main phase. Okay, so your turn is broken up into different phases and different steps. So you would start your turn with what is known as your draw. Okay. Let's go through the actual structure. So untap. So any cards that you have used in the previous turns, untap, so you can use them again. You then go to upkeep. So certain abilities refer to your upkeep. I don't think I've got any here. Yes, I do. Necrogoyf. Okay. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player discards a card. Okay, so you have untap, upkeep, which those effects happen. Then you have your draw step, where you pick up a card from your deck. Untap, upkeep, draw. And then you have your first main phase, where you can then play anything. So you can play your land for the turn. You're only able to play one land per turn. You can then tap those lands to use them to create mana to play your other spells, so creatures, instants, sorceries, etc. Then after your main phase, you go to combat. In your combat, you've got different steps. So you would start by going into combat. Then you would declare attackers. So you would decide which creatures you want to attack with. You don't choose whether you're attacking an opponent's creature. You only get to choose what you're attacking with. They then choose what they want to block with, if they want to block, or if they want to take the damage directly. And then you have the damage step where combat damage is calculated. So do any creatures deal damage to each other? Do creatures deal damage to a player? How does that happen? You've then got any abilities that resolve after combat damage is done. And then if a creature has dealt enough damage to be killed, then you clean up all of that. And then you go to your second main phase, where you can then play new creatures or other new spells. And from there, after second main, you go to your end step, where, so for example, that Archfiend of Depravity here, at the beginning of each opponent's end step, so if there's any abilities that say during an end step do this, then you would do those abilities, and then you have your last few bits and pieces of cleanup where any kind of remaining mana that you haven't spent disappears, stuff like that. Okay. So those are the different card types, and that is kind of how a turn is structured. What I think I'm going to do now is go through how you would typically play. So what I will be playing, so as I mentioned earlier, the format that I play the most or almost exclusively is known as Commander. And that format is basically you have a 100-card deck. Each card is unique with the exception of basic lands. And so it increases the kind of randomness of what you could potentially draw. Okay. So just going to give this a bit of a shuffle just to mix everything up a little bit. Okay. So out of the 100-card deck, you have either one or two commanders. Okay, so they are kind of like the champion of your deck. They don't sit within the rest of the 99 cards that you have. They sit separately to the side, and you can play them at any point of the game if you can afford it during one of your main phases. Okay, so if you somehow manage to get enough to play your commander in turn 1, you can play it in turn 1. You don't have to wait for you to draw it from your deck. But yeah, so you can play it as long as it's during your turn, and as long as you can afford it at any point. Okay. Well, when I say at any point, I mean specifically during your main phases. You can't cast your commander during combat. You can't cast it during the end step. 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So yeah, specifically during your main phases, your first main phase and your second main phase, you can then cast your commander if you can afford it. Okay. So to start off with, obviously we shuffle our deck to make sure that it's random. You're not trying to stack the deck to try and cheat your opponents out of winning, or cheat into winning. And then from there, typically in a tournament setting, your opponent would what's known as cut your deck. So let's ignore that I've already drawn my hand, but they would then split it, or they would reshuffle. Like no cost. What no cost? Sorry, I've got a little bit of delay on the actual live feed from what I'm recording, or what I'm saying. For some reason, there's a delay on this stream again. Okay, sorry, I didn't read the message above that. Are there any free commanders? Any that don't cost anything? As far as I'm aware, no. I do know of some that are 1 mana cost, so you can play it in turn 1. Yeah. So, for example, Reese the Redeemed, or Reese the Exiled. I think they're both 1 mana cost. Let's see what other 1 mana cost commanders there are. So your commander for your deck has to be a legendary creature. Okay. You can't use just a normal creature. It has to specifically be a legendary creature. So yeah, just some of the 1 mana cost commanders. We've got Ashnod. We've got Errant, 1 blue. We have Frodo that came out in the recent Lord of the Rings set that came out last year. We have Grist, which came out very recently, 2024, in the Modern Horizons 3 set, so it's also 1 mana cost. Haldir also came out in the Lord of the Rings set, so it was one of the commanders, and costs 1 green and any other amount, so you get to choose what to pay for X. Ismaru, or Isamaru, 1 mana cost. Kytheon, so he turns into Gideon. Yeah, Gideon. So it's from the Magic Origins set that came out in 2015. So yeah, he's 1 mana cost as well. Norin the Wary, 1 red. Avia Pashiri, 1 green. Ragavan, 1 red. Reese the Redeemed. So I want to get this to build my green-white deck. So you can see in his mana cost, or her mana cost, I'm not too sure, in their mana cost, to be politically correct, you can either pay green or white. Okay, it's not showing up too nicely on camera there. Can we get it closer? You can kind of see the color split there. So you can either do green or white. And then Rosnacht, costs 1 red, so he's a goblin, or kobold rather. Tamio, 1 blue. Tiny Bones, also from a recent set. It's from the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set, which was kind of Wild West themed, came out earlier this year. Valentine, Dean of the Vein, 1 black. So yeah, there's quite a lot of... Okay, so there's another 2 here. Yoshimaru and Zergo Bellstriker that are also 1 mana cost. Let me just check if there are any 0... I don't think there's any 0 mana cost commanders. I could be wrong. Let me just check. I am in fact wrong. There is a 0 mana cost commander. So as I mentioned, legendary creature, you can only use legendary creatures for commanders. And it is Rograk, son of Rogar. He's a 0 mana cost. He is a 0/1, and he has what's known as partner. So that means that if another commander has partner, then you can play with 2 commanders. And he has First Strike, Menace, and Trample. Okay, so those kind of 1-word abilities that I'll get into explaining in a bit. So yes, there are 0 mana cost commanders. Oh, yes, and Asmora. That's another one. So this particular card, nobody likes playing it just because of the name. But, so you'll notice that there's no mana cost up at the top. So Asmora Nomadica Dysternacule Dakar. Yeah, that one. Yeah, like I said, nobody likes playing this because nobody can pronounce it. So there's no mana cost for it, but the way that you play it is as long as you've discarded a card this turn, you can then pay to cast the spell. Okay, so it does in theory have a mana cost, but no actual converted mana cost. Okay. Cool. So yeah, once you have shuffled your deck, you've given it to your opponent to cut, so they can either then just split it into 3 piles and put it back together however they want, or they can shuffle it as well if they don't trust you to shuffle your own deck. And once you've done that, you then draw 7 cards. You did get me on a little bit of a tangent, but it's all good. Some people like to know these things, and that's the point of this, is not necessarily just informing new players of how to play, but players that are new to a particular format. So I know a lot of people that play only standard or modern, that have never branched off into Commander. So yeah, if people have these kinds of questions, all good, no stress. Okay, so I will then draw my hand. Okay, I'm going to show the camera. Typically, you don't show your opponent. Okay, so this is not too bad of a hand to start with. Okay, so we've got 1 card here. So Hunger of the Ancient One, it's a 5 mana cost. So again, you can see that this is a proxy. I've got it in my Vampire deck currently. Sanguine Bond, also a proxy, and that is a 5 mana cost as well, so let's group those 2 together. Vampiric Rites is a 1 mana cost, so we'll stick this more towards this side. So we've got 2 lands in our opening hand. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. Is that as far zoomed out as we can go? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so we've got 2 lands. And then we have 5 other cards. Typically, a person wouldn't keep this. Okay, just because if you take a look at the mana cost of the rest of the cards, you have one, that is one mana cost, which you'd be able to play straight away. Cool. But then all the others are 3 or higher. Okay, so this is 2 of any color, 1 black. 1 of any color, 2 black. 3 of any color, 2 black. 4 of any color, 1 black. Okay, so you, unless the next card here is another land, you can't play anything else in your hand anytime soon. So I know most players that would then discard, or they would choose to do what's known as a mulligan, which you put your hand back into your deck, you shuffle, and you draw another hand. I'm going to take the risk, because why not? So we start off our turn, okay, where, as I mentioned, the different phases earlier, the phases and steps, you start with your untap step. Okay, so because it's my first turn, I've got nothing to untap. There's nothing that I've used. We then go to upkeep, because I've got nothing out currently. There's no upkeep triggers. And then we go to draw. So I draw a card. Okay, so that's not too bad. It's 2 mana cost, so I've got 2 lands in my hand, so that's perfectly fine. I can afford to pay for it just now. And it allows me to draw 2 cards, but I do lose 2 life. Okay, so there's a bonus to it, but also, so it's got its pros and cons. In drawing 2 cards, I might be able to draw another land, which allows me to then kind of get the other stuff out down the line. So not a bad draw for early on. Cool. And so we've got untap, upkeep, draw, and once we've drawn a card, we can then go into our main phase, where we can then start playing. Hey Lee. Aaliyah, sorry. I know you don't like Lee. What up? Also, you can say bitch in my chat. It's fine. Actually, it might flag you. I don't know if I've got safe chat on at the moment. I don't know if it's filtering at all. Anyway, so I'd start off by playing a land. Okay, so you can play up to one land per turn, unless you have a card that says otherwise. There are other cards that allow you to play an extra land each turn, or you've got cards that allow you to search through your deck, find a land, and then put it into the battlefield. That's not regarded as playing a land. Okay. So from here, I have one land in play. I can then tap it, so we turn it sideways to show that we've used it. Okay, and my land, so the one thing I like about the old lands is it actually tells you. So when you tap it, you add 1 black mana to your mana pool. Okay, so I've tapped it. I have 1 black mana available to play something. As we saw earlier in my opening hand, I have Vampiric Rites, which is a 1 mana cost card. So I can play this straight away. The nice thing is, it's an enchantment. Okay, so it's permanent. It's not a once-off ability. It comes in and it sits there, and I can then use the ability that it has whenever I want. So I'm going to tap. I've got 1 mana available. I'm going to use that 1 mana to play my Vampiric Rites. Okay. Because I can't play anything else, okay, so all my land is used for the turn. I've got nothing else that's free to play, okay, I would then pass my turn. It then goes to my opponent's turn, and they start doing everything that I've just done. So untap, upkeep, draw, main phase, they would play something. If they can play a creature, a 1 mana cost creature, then they could do that. If it's a creature that has haste, they can attack with it straight away. And yeah, they then do their turn. Once they finish doing everything they need to, they then pass it back to me. And so I then start my turn. Okay, again, start of my turn, I untap. Okay, which means that I can now use this land again. Okay, I can use it to play a different spell. It's essentially been refreshed, and it is ready to be used for something else. Just because I used it to play the Vampiric Rites doesn't mean that it's specifically set for that. Okay, Vampiric Rites is already in play. I can use this for something else now. So, untap, upkeep. I've got nothing in the battlefield currently that has an effect during my upkeep. After my upkeep, I then draw. Okay, I have drawn another land. Okay, it's known as a command tower. And the nice thing is it taps for any color in my commander's color identity. What that means is, if we take a look at my commander, okay, anything relating to a particular color mentioned in the text of this card. Okay, so in the mana cost, in the ability, if there's anything that mentions a particular color, that is part of the commander's color identity. So, because Tergrid only has black in any of the text, so even if we flip her over to the other side, okay, because she's double-sided, you'll see in the ability here, also only has black. In her cost up there, also black. So, sorry, I've got a bit of a tickle in my throat. I should have grabbed some water to drink or something during the stream. Anyway, I'll remember for next time. So, because she only has black in her color identity, my command tower would only be able to tap for black as a color. Okay. So I am going to play it now, just because it's useful to have that to tap for, typically for any color. Currently it only taps for black. Okay. And then if we take a look at what else we have in our hand, I have that card that I drew last turn, Sign in Blood. If we take a look here, it's 2 mana cost. I have 2 lands that I can tap to create 2 black mana. Okay. I have 2 black mana that I can then use to pay that 2 to play this sorcery. Okay, remember sorceries are a once-off ability. It happens, you do the ability, it then goes to your graveyard. Okay, so this ability, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. Typically in a game of Commander, you would have 20 life. Let me grab my dice. Box of dice. My dice of box. Okay, so typically you would start off on 20 life. So these are called spin down life counters. They're 20-sided dice. And you'll see, so I would then subtract 1, subtract 2. So I start on 40 and I go down to 38. Let's go that way. So this is 20, that's 18, so I've got 38. So I draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Okay, so the 2 cards that I drew, the one is an artifact equipment. Okay, Lightning Greaves, which we saw earlier. It costs 2. And I drew a swamp. So I'm in luck. I've managed to draw another land. So I'm not going to be mana screwed. I'm not going to run out of lands. I'm not going to start picking up too many cards. If we take a look at what I've got in my hand, okay, at any given time, you aren't allowed to have more than 7 cards in your hand. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm still solid. I'm all good. Okay. At the end of your turn, if you have more than 7 cards in your hand, then you have to pick one to discard, and it goes to the graveyard. Okay. So I've played my Sign in Blood. The ability has happened. It's a sorcery, it's a once-off. It then goes to my graveyard, and it is essentially out unless I have something with an ability that brings something back from the graveyard. Okay. Up next, we have... so I can't afford to play any creatures. Okay. If I did, then I could play a creature now. And do any of the abilities, but because that's all I can play, so all of my lands are tapped, meaning I have no mana available to cast any other spells. I can't do anything else right now, so I would then pass my turn to my opponent. Okay. They would do their turn. Once they finished with everything on their side, they would pass back to me, and start of my turn, untap, upkeep. I've got nothing that happens during my upkeep, and then my draw step. So I would then pick up another card. It is a Necrogen Mists, which costs 3, okay, and has an ability around discarding cards. Cool, perfect, that's what this deck is designed to do. And I would then play another land. Okay, I'm going to play another Swamp. So I now have 3 land available, which taps for 3 mana. I now have 2 options for cards that I can play. Up until now, it's been pretty straightforward. My first turn, I had one mana cost card that I could play. My second turn, I only had 1 2 mana cost card that I could play. This turn, I have 2 options that I can choose from. I have a 3 mana cost creature, Liliana's Spectre, that when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card, which would be useful for me to have something to attack and block with. Or I have a Soul Shatter, okay, so also 3 mana cost, and it is an instant, so it's a once off. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. Now, with it being so early in the game, it's probably not wise for me to play this and force my opponents to sacrifice a creature. They're probably going to be playing their bigger things, their scarier creatures, later on when they've got more mana later on in the game to be able to play those. Okay. Also, in a game of Commander, I may not necessarily only be playing against one other player. I can be playing multiple other opponents. So most Commander games you have 4 players, so it would be me and 3 opponents, okay? And again, this early on in the game, my opponents may not actually even have any creatures out. So I wouldn't want to play that. If it would only cause one opponent to sacrifice a creature right now, I'm not getting the full benefit out of that card. So the better play right now would be to play my Liliana's Spectre. So I'm going to tap 3 mana to create... tap 3 lands to create 3 mana, which I can then use to pay the cost of my Liliana's Spectre. It comes into the battlefield, and as the ability says, when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. Okay, so they would then discard a card, and I can't do anything else. I've just played this creature, and it doesn't have an ability called Haste, which means that I can't attack with it this turn because I've just played it. You can only attack with creatures the next turn after they've been played. Okay, they have what is known as Summoning Sickness, which is basically just an effect that means they can't attack the turn that they come into play, or until your next turn. Okay. So yeah, your game would pretty much carry on like this, following those steps. Okay, untap, upkeep, draw, play a land if you can, tap however many lands you need to be able to play however many spells. You can play more than 1 spell a turn. So if I had 3 mana out and I had these 2 in my hand, because this one costs 2 and this one costs 1, I can afford to play both in 1 turn. Okay. So for however much mana you have available, that is how many cards you can play if you can afford to pay for all of them. Sorry, sounded like someone might have been at my door. Okay. So yeah, you'd carry on playing stuff, play creatures. So after your first main phase, as I mentioned, you have your combat phase where you can then attack, hopefully deal some damage to your opponent, and the first player to hit 0 life loses. Or alternatively, there are some other ways that you can win a game, such as if your opponent can no longer draw any cards, so they've played everything, or you've managed to get rid of their entire deck somehow. If they can't draw a card the next time they're supposed to, then they would lose the game. I'm trying to think, what other clauses are there? Poison counters. If you deal enough poison damage to an opponent and they have 10 poison counters, they lose the game. Your commander, if your commander deals 21 or more damage, as soon as it hits 21, okay, then your opponent loses if you deal that much damage to your opponent, specifically with your commander. So that's kind of how you would win in a commander game, is one of those kind of things. As I mentioned, you have different formats that get played. And I think what I will do is I will leave talking about formats and those one-worded abilities until next week, just so that I'm not bombarding you guys with too much information. And I'm seeing something over my shoulder. Oh, it's a pillow on the bed in the background. Okay. So we're going to end it there. It has been an hour and 15 minutes. Well, technically, for me, it's been an hour 45. Thank you, Shahir, for mentioning at the start of the previous stream that I had forgotten to unmute my microphone. But I think we'll end it there for this week. And I think that's a good starting point for those of you that are looking at getting into Magic. This is just looking at an introduction to playing black in particular. Okay, so I've been showing you how to play a black deck. As I mentioned, there are 5 colors that you can choose from. You can pick any kind of color combination. So I have a 5-color commander deck. Okay, he is a Sliver Hive Lord. He's 5 colors, so white, blue, black, red, and green. I have which one's this? My Lord of the Rings deck. Okay, 3 colors, blue, black, and red. And I will show you guys my Lord of the Rings card collection at some point. It is something I'm very proud of. But yeah, something for another day. Another color combination deck that I have is white, black, green. Okay, so yeah, depending on what colors you feel most comfortable playing, you can build pretty much any deck around that. There's so many different themes to build stuff around. For any new player, my recommendation, if you're wanting to start out, is to buy what's known as a pre-con. So it's a pre-constructed deck, and you can buy them either, if you're wanting to get into the commander format, you can buy a commander pre-con. If you're wanting to get into modern or standard, you can buy pre-constructed decks for those formats as well. My recommendation would be go and speak to someone at your nearest game store that stocks Magic cards. I will try and put together a list of some of the game stores in like the biggest cities around the country, Joburg, Cape Town, Durban. Currently, there's nothing in Pietermaritzburg, unfortunately. There's a few shops that stock a little bit of Magic products, but nothing extensively. So I'm talking specifically those local game stores in South Africa. But if you're overseas and you're watching this, then yeah, a quick Google search should be able to point you in the direction of your nearest game store, and they'll be able to then show you or help you out with buying a deck that's best suited to whatever format you're wanting to play. So next week we'll look at different deck formats or different tournament formats, styles that you can play. We'll look a little bit more at other colors and what they do, and we will look a little bit more at specific the one-worded abilities, things like flying, death touch, lifelink, things like that. I hope that's been a good enough introduction for you guys. I hope that you have enjoyed, and yeah, I'll catch you guys next week, Wednesday, for another Midweek Magic stream where we will talk about some new topics. If you have any questions or if you think of anything that you need help with, bring it to next week's stream or drop it on the video in the comments down below on this video. Don't forget to subscribe. We have another Assassin's Creed playthrough live stream coming this Friday. I'm hoping to do another PUBG live stream at some point, possibly either over the weekend or next week at some point. And we might have some new faces in on that live stream. I'm still busy putting together some other recorded content. So I've got a Magic the Gathering game that I recorded with some friends that I'm still busy editing. It's taking some time just because of what I'm wanting to put into it for the sake of people that aren't familiar with the game. Yeah, so there's a lot of other varied content coming out. Comic Con is coming up, Comic Con Africa, which I'm really keen to go to. I'm hoping to see some friends up there that I haven't seen in a while, and experience more of the South Africa's geek culture and nerd culture. So I'll definitely bring you guys along for that journey as well. That's coming up end of September. I might also do a live stream in 2 weeks' time. So if I'm not working at it, then I'll definitely do a live stream walking around of the Hilton Arts Festival. It's the second biggest arts festival in the country. Showing you guys some of the art that's on display, some of the performances, the live performances and things that are around, and what there is to offer. So I might do a live stream while walking around, or I might just record a vlog and post that. So there's a variety of content coming to the channel soon. So yeah, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so that you know when I go live or when I post. But there will be another Magic the Gathering live stream next week, Wednesday, which the date is... No problem. I'm glad that you enjoyed. And yeah, there will be more of an introduction to it next week, to dive a little bit deeper into it. So I'm just checking the date, the 24th, Wednesday the 24th of July 2024. I will be doing another live stream, so I'll see you guys back here for that. And for those of you that want to tune in for the Assassin's Creed stream on Friday, please do tune in. I'll see you there for that. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week, guys. We're halfway through, almost made it to Friday again, almost weekend. Stay safe, and yeah, I'll see you guys all around. Cheers, everyone.